Welcome to the International Franchise Association's Women's Franchise Committee podcast, Her Success, the stories of female franchise leaders. I'm Amanda Dempsey, a franchise attorney and shareholder with the firm of Saxon & Stump, and today I'll be speaking with Barbara Moran. I am quite lucky to have been able to snag the interview with Barb. We've had lots of good conversations, and I'm really excited for everyone to hear all the great things that she has to say. So just a little bit of background on Barb. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Moran family of brands, which includes 6 brands: Mr. Transmission, Dr. Nick's Transmissions, Multi-State Transmissions, Milex Complete Auto Care, Turbo Tint, and Altamir Automotive Outfitters. Barb has over 30 years of experience in franchising and in the automotive aftermarket industry. She grew her business into a portfolio of automotive brands with over 100 locations in 25 states and counting. She's considered an industry expert and frequent guest speaker at both the automotive and franchise industry events. She's also very active with the IFA, which we're so happy about. She's a former member of the IFA's board of directors, former member of the Women's Franchise Committee, and the co-founder of the Chicago Women's Franchise Network. She's a recipient of the Bonnie Levine Award for her mentorship of others in franchising. She also has a distinct passion for improving franchisor and franchisee relationships. She's authored several articles on the topic, and she serves as the chair of the Franchise Relations Committee. So we are so lucky to have Barb. And Barb, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me join you. I'm very happy and proud to be able to talk with you and share some stories, I guess.
Yeah. So let's start there. So for those of you who don't know your story, let's start at the beginning. So how'd you get involved in the automotive industry, which I think, everyone would consider a male-dominated industry. So how did you get involved in that industry and then eventually franchising?
Well, my father was a serial entrepreneur, and growing up, he was in automotive, and I was the youngest, and there was a large age gap between the next youngest and myself and the oldest. And so I would be in the vehicle with my mother, going to either pick up parts or going to the bank, running errands for the business. And sometimes my dad would take me to his body shop, and then also I would go to various auctions. So he also had used car lots and would buy vehicles through auctions. So I was a part of that growing up, and I was also aspiring to be an artist. I was accepted to the Art Institute of Chicago. I was mainly a sculptor, and I realized when I was in school that I remember I was asking, okay, well, what could I do with this degree in fine arts? And they said, well, you could be a teacher. And I'm like, oh, that's not really what I want to do. But anyways, I needed a summer job. So I went to work for my father and my mother, learning basically accounting.
Yeah.
I was not really great at math. And anyways, so I went and had a summer job, and I realized that it just clicked, being in business and learning and excelling at it. And my mother really was, she was my first mentor, and she taught me so much, and she was so smart. She knew, she dabbled in legal, she dabbled in accounting, CFO, all these things. And so I really decided that, I wanted to work in the business and learn as much as I could. However, because it was a business at the time, we had over probably 150 men working in the company and maybe 3 women. And they were the ones always in accounting. And so anyways, I kept on asking my father, well, where can I go in this? What can I do? And he always would tell me, you've gone as far as you can. I was the office manager, corporate secretary of the company. And that was after about 4 or 5 years. And I said, well, I want more. And so I went off to go back to school to become, I wanted to become a lawyer. And so, but I wanted to be a lawyer in a specific area, which was involving computers and software development and stuff like that. Because working in accounting, I saw all these, I saw these programs that didn't work right. And people were spending tons of money on these programs and they wouldn't work. So and it was just it was the wild west of, desktop computers,
Yeah, that's so forward thinking of you though. Like I can't even, what was it, 80s, 90s?
It was the 80s.
You saw it coming. Like you saw it coming before anyone. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and so I was taking computer programming, I was taking accounting, because those go together. I was taking also business law. And so I actually left the company. This was in the 80s, before it was Moran Industries started. And I went back because that's what I wanted to do, because he told me I could never do anything more in the company. So then basically, I'll shorten the story up. I got hit in the head when I was in college, when I went back, and I got hit in the head and was unconscious for a couple of weeks. And when I woke up, I had severe injury, and I had to learn how to walk and talk and everything again, and I had to learn different ways of remembering, because I had short-term memory loss. And I could not go back to school because they were concerned I would have seizures when you have traumatic brain injuries. And so after about 3-4 months of recovery, I decided to go back working for my dad in the meantime, and my mother. And I thought, until I'm recovered completely, they told me it would be about 2 years. I'm going to just, learn as much as I can. So what ended up happening was I didn't leave. So, and then my father allowed me to learn more, and I took over marketing, and I took over all these other areas. And then one day he said to me, he goes, well, what do you think of franchising? And I said, franchising? Now, mind you, I didn't know what franchising was then. I did work for Burger King and a Burger King franchisee, but I didn't know that. I just thought it was Burger King. I worked for Denny's. I thought it was Denny's. I didn't know that it was a franchise. When you think about that. So I said, well, franchising sounds great. And he goes, well, let's get on a plane and go buy a franchise company. So he and I got on a plane, and we went and negotiated till 2 a.m. To purchase Mr. Transmission out of bankruptcy. It had been bankrupt because of the predecessor mistreating it. And franchisees became upset and, stopped paying, and it ended up in bankruptcy. And so we bought the trademarks. At the time, we only had a really small few that came with us. The rest came after time, but my job during that period was to get the corporate entity set up, get everything registered, do the due diligence for a merger or acquisition, and then move the company from Nashville to Chicago. And during that time, I was pregnant.
Yeah.
And my father,
of course you were.
Yeah, of course, yes. And I think my father at one point forgot I was pregnant, because he, in my 9th month, he's like, well, you need to go to Nashville and oversee this move up. And I go, I can't get on a plane. And he's like, well, then drive there. And I go, I can't leave.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a baby.
Oh my gosh.
And so after that, I, of course, had my daughter. Within a week, he fired me.
Wow.
Yes. And it was a
I
month
guess he
after.
remembered, huh? He remembered you were you
Oh,
were
yeah. Oh,
pregnant.
my gosh. I couldn't believe he fired me. And he was so angry. And I had just bought, my husband and I had just bought a townhome. And so and apparently, what he ended up telling me later on in life was that he wanted me to stay home. And I thought, well, that was not possible. I had to work to be able to
Right.
help support the family.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of riff in there. That we had about a year and a half where my father and I were not getting along at all. And he kept asking me to come back because the things that I oversaw were turning into disaster zones, and I
Right.
refused. I went to work for the government during that period.
So you didn't stay home
No, I didn't.
after all that.
But it helped me learn. My second mentor, a woman, came into play then. And
Yeah, so
she,
let's talk a little bit. So, I mean, do you think that seeing your mom as one of the three kind of women that were working in that business? I mean, the family business story is so interesting to me because I grew up in family business. My family has an accounting practice, and it was my grandfather's and then my mom's, and I
Mhm.
kind of grew up there. Kind of similar to you, like I had a room upstairs where I'd stay when I was sick, and there was no staying home when I was sick. I was at work with my mom. So
Yep.
that's been super influential to me to see my mom like really being one of um a woman in work, but also a powerful woman at work, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
so I wonder whether that was, even though your dad was telling you no, 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 like you saw your mom doing it, right? Was that really influential for you?
It was extremely influential because my mother and my father were partners, 50-50. And my mother handled the back end of the business because there's a lot that goes on in the back end, all the way from knowing, marketing through to legal to financial. And she did all of that. And so, it really showed me how important that is in business. You have, I always refer to it as you have your front end where that's your interaction with your customers.
Mhm.
And you need that part of your business, but you also need the back end. And they're both equally as important because you could have a ton of business coming in the front door, but if you're not managing it, it will go right out the back door.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And you
so,
saw your mom handling all that, so you're like, "I can definitely do it."
mhm,
At a
yeah,
time where, there was, as you said, it was like, what was it? 153?
yeah.
150 to 3. All
Well,
right, so you went and worked for the government, and
yep.
you had a kind of a new mentor there, which was, outside your family.
Right. So she was a state representative in Illinois, and she actually had been in office for 19 years at that point. She was very powerful. She had a lot of other politicians as well as senators, state senators, also, federal level, uh, communicating with her on a regular basis. And the reason is because she became very, when I say powerful, I mean in the sense that she made herself invaluable because she believed when she went into office that her job was to help her constituents through, the red tape of bureaucracy.
Hmm.
And so other, state representatives and state senators, or even, senators and congressmen would go to her with one of their constituents' issues for her office to help with. And so I learned that uh, I learned about your word has to match your actions. And if your word matches your actions, you can excel and move up and have respect. If your words don't match your actions, then you will never be trusted as well as even a go-to. So she made herself invaluable by being a go-to person, and really taught me how to interact and engage with men who were in office, and how to move up.
Yeah, no, that's really it's interesting, and it's also, I would say, probably people's kind of number one complaint about politics. Not that I want to make this about politics, but it's interesting that you met someone politically who was both a woman and who could kind of back up what she was saying, right? So,
Right.
yeah, I'm sure that made her super valuable,
Boy.
and also, yeah, like you said, really great role model.
Yeah, she was. Yes.
So after your dad realized that you weren't going to stop working, it sounds like you found your way back to working at the business.
Well, what ended up happening was he kept asking and asking, and then he ended up offering my husband and I the opportunity to become franchisees. And so I decided that, I'll go back to work for him. The funny thing is during that whole time that I wasn't working for him, I still was corporate secretary and had, partial ownership in the company.
Yeah.
So
you couldn't get too far.
No. So anyways, I went back to work for him, and eventually he would still tell me that I was never going to run the company, that it was a man's world, and in automotive. And I decided that, I'll stay working with him while, and I'm going to learn everything I can about starting my own business. And eventually what ended up happening was, 9 years later, I got sick. My father got very sick, and we were both recovering. And then at the same time, and the person that was running the company was not running it with my father's vision in mind, and he wasn't treating franchisees well. And my father sent me to go find someone to run the company that would see his vision and also improve the relationships with the franchisees. And so he was a big fan of Bob Gappa, Management 2000, and had me go and spend 3 days with him and basically go over all the things that were wrong, what was happening in the company, what would I do, how would we do this? And we were trying to find who the right person was. And after 3 days, he says, I know who it is. I said, okay, who is it? Who should I approach? He says, well, let me go. I got to go take care of something. I'll be back. He leaves, and I'm sitting in the conference room for like an hour, hour and a half. And he comes back and he goes, okay. And I go, well, are you going to tell me now? And he said, yes, it's you. I go, oh no, my father told me I would never run this company. He says, well, I just got off the phone with him and he's in agreement. And I thought, oh shit, I don't know if I want this. Because it was a mess. And I didn't know if I could clean it up. So, and all I knew is I had to learn, and I realized I needed the right team on board because they were the ones that would help to change the direction.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it sounds like you found a pretty good fit for yourself because, I mean, you've taken that one brand up to 6, and I know, you guys continue to grow. So I guess let's talk a little bit about team and also about treatment of franchisees, because I think those two are really important kind of pillars in franchising, right? So, your support on the franchisor side, and then also, how you support your franchisee population. What's continued to kind of draw you in to franchising, and do those two things play a part?
Yeah. Well, first of all, relationships are key in everything in franchising, and your franchisees are your soldiers. They're the ones out there making it happen. So you have to have the camaraderie, the respect for each other, and it is really about being a team all together. When I was younger, I don't know. When I went to the Art Institute of Chicago, I would go to artists and I would say, "You really are awesome at painting, and I would love to do a sculpture painting combo and would love to work together." And they thought I was nuts. They're like, "You don't do that. I do me and you do you." And I'm like, "No, no, collaboration." So that was where I was thinking we were going to be going, and what I thought was important and needed was collaboration with the franchisees. But it's not easy getting there. It is not easy because there's so many things that you could be thinking um, of the other person, the perception. So the perception that the franchisees had back then was of not trusting at all. And when I went out on the road, I decided to go, well, first of all, the first thing I did, which is really bizarre. I know you probably are like, why would you do that? um, I actually called Ken Walker, who at the time was running Meineke. And he had this really great reputation of how he had transitioned their franchisees' um, belief system over because they had similar issues, and he had changed that direction and the relationship he had built with the franchisees. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna call him and see if I could talk to him. Now, yes, was he a competitor? Absolutely. But I called. He said, why don't you come visit and we can talk? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And I remember, first of all, the fact that he was willing to talk to me and share. And I talked and I said, when I got there, I'm like, so how did you do this? And he says, well, you got to get out there, talk to the franchisees, and you're going to have to take a lot of arrows.
Yeah.
And I go, okay. And he goes, and you're going to have to do a lot of listening and apologizing. And so that's what we did. And I remember going out, and I'm not kidding you. I had hired a gentleman who was going to be my vice president, and he was from the window industry. A lot of people know him, Pete. He was from the window industry, glass, and knew nothing about transmissions. And I grew up in the transmission business. We go out on the road to meet with franchisees, and they are only talking to him, and they're not talking to me. And I guess they thought that I was, oh, you're just the daughter. You don't know anything. It's a business where you've been, promoted into this just for the face of it. And
Right.
and they were saying things incorrectly in front of the Pete, and I was looking at him and I'm like, don't you mean this? And it was a specific model of a transmission.
Right.
And they said, oh, you really do know about transmissions? And I said, yes, I'm from the transmission industry. He's from the glass industry. He knows nothing about this. But you're just talking to him. And so what I did, instead of getting upset, because I was upset, believe me, every time we'd get in the car, I would like say stuff to Pete about how rude they were and dismissive. And so anyways, I had to think about it, and I was thinking, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going about this all wrong. I just need to tell them that, listen, just give me some time to show you, because I could tell you all day long what I'm going to do or what we are going to do, but it won't be reality until you see it actually happen. So I'm not asking you to respect me. I'm not asking you to trust me right now. I just want you to give me an opportunity to show you what we can do. And that's where we started.
That's awesome. And then you were actually able to deliver on it, which is even better, right? That's the next part, which I'm sure was really difficult. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is all that franchising is. It's all relationships and it's building trust. And I mean, I think we've all seen, I mean, I'm sure you've seen over the years, and even I have, just the systems that operate on fear versus trust, right? So it's, I mean, there's a different way of doing it, which is, kind of like the living by the terms of the contract kind of thing, which is, I know the importance of contracts. I certainly draft them for a living, but what I always tell my brands is that the goal is that you put it in the drawer and never need it, right?
Right.
And that's unfortunately, the kind of the other way of doing it is kind of living by the terms of the contract. I think you kind of got the right idea with the way you guys have been doing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. But the one thing I do want to say on this part too is it's just not saying it. It's having surrounding yourself with people that are a part of the team that get it and understand it. So where we're at today would not have been accomplishable if it wasn't for the team that we have. And I look at, what we've accomplished. And one of the things that we also do is we talk about the successes that we have with franchisees. And for us, I talk about the fact that this is one business model that actually has significant purpose. And when you look at you wanting to do something that has purpose in life and being a part of a bigger picture, franchising is that. We are able to take and help people go into business for themselves, but not by themselves, to help them with support services so that they can concentrate on the actual relationship with their customers and go from what, like my father, where poverty, to having wealth in the family and being able to raise your children up, and then they'll raise their children up. And so, small business and franchising is an avenue of bringing someone out of poverty and helping them. And so I always say to our team, the best days are when we have a franchisee after 20, 30 years say, okay, I'm ready to retire. And they get a return on their investment, and they were able to provide for their family, and they had a beautiful home. They had were able to provide for their children, and just the love that they were able to do because of the success they had in business, and we got to be a part of that, a part of helping. That is the best days.
Yeah, it's really a privilege if you look at it that way.
Mhm.
And I think at its absolute best, it's a win-win, right? It's hard because, I mean, obviously everyone has their own interests, but really at the core of it, it should be a win-win.
Right.
And I think if that's your core value, which it's clear to me that it is, it'll really work for people, and it works for you and your family and them and their families, which is really kind of the goal.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about women, because I mean, as you mentioned, that story is so great about, the franchisees talking to Pete, and Pete's talking about windows, and you're talking about transmissions.
Yeah.
And I know Pete, so that makes it funny. But yeah, I just how do you think things have improved for women since then? I mean, if at all. I think, your industry is still pretty male dominated. I would, I think, right? And so do you think that Do you think that things have really improved? And what do what do you see? I mean, I'm sure things have changed certainly, but do you think they've improved?
I do. Okay. I apologize. I have a puppy and he is wanting out of my office. So just 1 second, I'm going to, yes,
Sure
honey,
thing.
you go. He's a little cutie. He's a cavapoo. And anyway, so there has been improvement. First of all, there is many more women involved in the automotive industry. And they are ones that are working together, developing camaraderie. There's women in automotive, auto care. There's different conferences that we go to, but there is still a level of that male-dominated section, okay? And it's been literally going, climbing that mountain, one section at a time. And the more women that we bring into the automotive industry, the more we have an equal playing field. That is why, from my perspective, one of the things that we here need to strive for is bringing more women into automotive franchising. They actually do wonderful. Our female franchisees and husband and wife teams, they are doing exceptional in their business. And, franchising is further along than automotive. But I also look at where I came from in automotive in the 1980s. It was despicable.
Right.
So
Yeah.
That type of behavior and the atmosphere would be completely unacceptable in today's world. And it is because of the women that came before us doing the fight, plowing through and trying to get to the next level. And we all have to keep doing that, and we have to keep supporting each other. We could say, well, why can't we just have it through legislation or through, having protesting? It doesn't happen. It's a paradigm shift that has to take place in a person's thought process, and because behind closed doors, they could act exactly the way they had all these years, and you would know it.
If you force it, yeah, I know. Yeah, it is super interesting. And I mean, certainly throughout our country's history, we've had kind of forced, right?
Yes.
Forced societal change. And I think I've always been a fan of like infiltrate and convince, if that makes any sense, right? So
That's
just
exactly
get me in there so I can show them, right?
Mhm.
And then, you and I have talked about this previously, but then also once you're in, right, bringing other women in and supporting the women that
Mhm.
are there already, so that, you're creating that core of really valuable women in whatever industry, right? Whatever industry, whatever business it is.
Mhm. That is key. And, it's funny because I remember when Sheryl Sandberg came out with I attended a couple of her speaking engagements, and she talked about leaning in. And that is exactly what needs to continue, and getting more people at the table, more women at the table, and helping to elevate. We need to all be supporting each other, and again, trying to do it through anger is not going to get us there. Trying to do it through pressure, it will only happen if we can all work together, and showing that we are far more capable than whatever their thinking is. And I think in franchising, that is exactly what's been happening. More women are going into franchises because they realize they don't want to be in that corporate structure where having to play in that field. I mean, every industry has some sort of it. You look at finance, M&A, PEs. You could go on and on and on and see where there's a male-dominated atmosphere, and women going into it just have to keep pushing forward and leaning in and getting that seat at the table and raising up. And franchising, when we first started out, oh my gosh, I think you could literally like look and say, okay, there's like 50 women in franchising in the 90s. That's basically, it was very limited.
Yeah. I mean, I'll even say, so I've been a franchise attorney for a little over 10 years. So like my first IFA convention, I think, was like 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I was like the only person in the room. And that wasn't even true then, right? So it's just it's become so different. And I mean, part of that was just me being new, right? And the newness, the feeling. But I think that it's definitely come a long way. And I think franchising is an interesting way to do it. The model really lends itself because it's across industry, right? So, I mean, you do have female dominated industries that are in franchising.
Right.
And so those people who are leading those type of brands and getting a seat at the table at the IFA, or getting a seat at the table, lobbying the Hill, because they have the same interest from the franchise perspective. Maybe their industry is different, right? Maybe they're in health and wellness and not automotive,
Right.
So it is interesting. I think there's such a opportunity there for women to really be influential in franchising because of that, because it's not really it's not industry specific,
Right. That is right there what you said, not industry specific. And actually, one of the first franchises that we have was a hair salon that was developed by a woman. If you go back in history.
Yep.
And so from my perspective, franchising has improved dramatically, where we had, like I said, maybe 50 women in the room. And that was when there was probably about 400 people coming to the conventions back in the 90s. And now, you go and there's thousands. And then you see how many more, even in, the IFA board. When I first came onto the IFA board in 2006, the first time, there were 2 other women on there. And then a third one came on. And then, more came on. And then more came on. And now we have many.
Yeah.
So again,
that's great. That's got to feel so good for you. Because you're part of it, right? Like you're part of those first 50.
Yeah, well, there was plenty of wonderful women that came right before me that I just, they pushed and I just joined with it. And when I say pushed, it was, first of all, I believe it was Joyce Mazzaro that came up with the Women's Franchise Committee. And I don't know if it was her, I don't know specifically who, if it was Dina or Joyce or all of them together decided on the leadership, conference, okay, that you guys hold.
Yeah.
When that first started, it was like 20 women in a room. Okay. I remember because I think the second year it was up to like 30 or 40, and I was one of those in the room.
Yeah.
And then we ended up rolling it into a lunch. And I remember when we got up to 100 in the room. And now how many? Oh, I remember when I think we hit 350 or something. It was like year 8 or 9. I don't remember. It was crazy. We were like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah. It sells out every year. This year, I think we were around the 350 mark, but we try to keep it at that number because of
Right.
the camaraderie that happens there. But yeah, I mean, it is, and it's, it's a different event. It's a full day before the IFA convention. So it's a big commitment for people to come. And so we've been really honored that people really want to come, and
Right.
find value in it over the years. It's a great thing. I just saw Joyce speak at the IFA legal symposium last week. So
Oh, you did? Yeah.
yeah, she did a panel and I attended. So yeah,
Well,
that's
she is one that was a great influence for women in franchising. She was one that pushed
yeah.
forward and by creating that summit leadership conference. It didn't start out as a conference, say, but just an educational session,
Yeah.
and rolled into what it is today. That's what we all need to be doing, and helping each other and supporting each other and giving each other ideas. And the funny thing is that it used to be only women in there, and then the men started saying, wait a minute, I want to be a part of this.
Yep. I know, because when we plan the speakers, part of that is the conversation, right? That it's open to everyone and everyone comes. But we do try to keep most of the speakers as women because, it's our session, right?
Right. Yes, it is. Well,
Yeah.
it also, you're trying to show other women, hey, these are people that can be mentors to you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great group and it's still really it's been really influential for me and I know it was for you too. So it's still going. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about just the workplace in general. So in the last few years, this kind of post-COVID era, I mean, it kind of shook everything up in the employment space. And so things have changed significantly in just even the last handful of years. And in your experience, kind of leading different teams, how do you kind of continue to motivate and empower the people that work with you in just kind of like this changing environment?
Well, first of all, it is exactly what you just said, empowering people. So first of all, we have, for the most part, gone back into an office facility. During COVID, we actually had a very large space that was more like a warehouse that had offices in there. And it just really, to me, it did not speak to who we were and what we did. So we went out, looked for a new place, we demoed it and rebuilt everything. And we wanted a place that was very comfortable for people to be in, to, take time to go and sit in different areas, make sure that we have an environment that's very open to collaboration and talking and communication. We do hybrid. We have some that are working from home pretty much 100% of the time, and then in other states. And then we have some that come in and they'll do a couple days in, a couple days out, and working from home. But there's a lot of collaboration that goes on. We all talk. We have transparency. We talk about what's going on, where we stand with various things. We make sure that we're keeping everybody in the know. Communication is so key for all of us to know exactly where we stand and the work we're doing. And then also making sure that, there's respect and appreciation. And, the teams that we have developed, we support. You gotta, and in supporting, you can't go and say to somebody, I want you to make decisions, and then when they make a decision, you chastise them for it. From my perspective, we all make mistakes, okay? And it's not about making the mistake, it's about the fact of acknowledging the mistake, looking at it and saying, how do we prevent this from happening again? and helping each other to correct it and put those parameters in place that are your checks and balances on preventing that from happening again. And but it's also opportunity for learning.
Mm-hmm.
That's where so you know,
yeah, you
with
don't want
that,
people to be afraid to learn.
no, you can't. Oh my gosh, I remember that that was the way it was, the
Mm-hmm.
environment here, and everybody was task oriented. Back, I remember 20 some years ago when I had taken over the position of being the president. I was shocked. I'm like, you don't know how to do your job, but that's what you're paid for.
Yeah. They were
And
afraid to ask, probably.
yes, because the predecessor, the way they worked it was, you go do what I told you to do, and then come back and report what happened, and I'll tell you what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't operate like that. I'm not
Yeah.
that type of person. I'm like, I need you to all. That's why you're supposed to be better at this than me.
Right.
So I get and the other thing is, you have to get excited when, like, let's say that someone comes in and they work wonderful for you and you elevate them, and then eventually one day they say, you know what, I want to go do something else, and I've got this opportunity. Instead of being upset with that, you should embrace and say, you know what, I helped them get there.
Right.
You know, we all should be proud of that.
Yeah, that's that kind of like uplifting from the inside, and empowering people to, as you said, learn and do their job and do it in a way that makes impact. I mean, I think everyone wants that out of their job, right? Like they want to. I always say, like, if we spend all of our day at work and it doesn't mean anything,
Mhm.
it's got to be hard to just continue to go day after day. So, yeah, that's
Exactly. And I want I want to help people enjoy what they're doing. And so the role that I try to play in this is inspiring people to constantly want to gain more knowledge, and then be able to give that to the franchisees, and coach them, and help them advance. So, that's the utopia of it. Now, does it work that way every day and all day long? No, it doesn't.
of course not.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have one kind of final question for you. So in 2010, you rebranded the company from Moran Industries to the Moran family of brands. And I think it's interesting that you included the word family in kind of the overall name of the company. What does family mean to you? I think, this interview has already showed it can mean a lot of complex things, but what does it
Mhm.
mean to you? And does that concept of family play a role in the way you manage the business?
Uh, yes and yes. No. Okay, so first of all, when I took the step in 2010 to purchase the company, actually, what ended up happening was my father and I were having disagreements on the path to take in running the business. He had not been involved in it for a long period of time. There was a lot of things going on. And he said, well, if you don't like what I'm saying to you, then buy me out. And I said, okay, I'll buy you out. So when I ended up getting that accomplished, which took a lot because it was during the Great Recession, and running around trying to find a bank to fund was not easy. And so, anyways, purchased a company, and when I had asked our marketing team to come up with a new name that talked about who we wanted to be, not who we were, but who we wanted to be. We talked about family, and I looked at that when my husband and I went into our first franchise. My father was paying me horribly. He thought I should work for love. So the money we made to buy a house, to put food on the table, to have our children have a nice environment and to grow up in did not come from my father's, how he, treated me with pay. It was from our franchise. And that to me was one of the first keys was it's about family. It's about when they want to go into business, they're doing it, if they have a family, they're doing it for their family. They're taking that chance. If don't have a family yet, or they're, single, they're doing it for their future. And many times they're wanting to pass that on as a legacy. And so, I look at, second generation. Even though I was part of the beginning and developing Moran Industries, I really was second generation. And now we have third generation in. And we should also be proud of that and not have that be a stigma of, oh, you got nepotism or blah, blah, blah. No, wait, don't you want this business to be there for the future, for your future? What do you expect? You just want it to go away one day or get sold, and then where are you at? And people, when they go into franchising, that's what they're doing. They're building a legacy, whatever it looks like to them, and that involves family. Yeah. So that's why family ended up coming up in our name, because that's who we want to be.
Yeah. And it's, it certainly has played a large role in your life, both as like a working mom and a working daughter, yes. All of that. So, I think, you saw firsthand how, kind of family and business go together. And I think that's really true of probably most of your franchisees. As you mentioned, a lot of them have husband and wife teams, or maybe they're kind of passing on to their children. So, I think that's great. I think it's definitely, it makes sense that that's really kind of core to your mission, at all the brands, right? So that's great.
Yes. Well, it's a work in progress always. You're going to have failures, and what you have to do is learn from your failures. And when you haven't been doing things correctly, and when I say correctly, meaning with integrity, you have to own it and be accountable for it and correct it. And if apologies are owed, you got to say it.
Yeah. If you could go back and give Barb Moran some advice in the 90s, 80s and 90s, what would you tell her?
It's okay. It will get better one day.
Yeah. It'll be great one day, right?
Back then, I just thought that I kept on feeling like every day there was always a roadblock. Every day there was always a challenge that I had to figure out how to overcome for the health and wealth of my family.
Yeah. And then you built this big family, right? So you kept after it.
And I will keep after it. So
awesome. No, that's the best part, right? Well, that is, I think that's a great place to stop. And I thank you so much for the recording today, but also I'm so inspired by so many of our calls that we had in preparation for today's interview. So I'm so glad to have met you through this process, and just thank you from me, but then from the Women's Franchise Committee, and then just also all the women in franchising who you've kind of paved the way for. So thanks so much, Barb, and I know we'll keep in touch.
Yes, and thank you for all that you are doing, because it is women like you that are right there to help and to volunteer, and being a part of the Women's Franchise Committee and being involved with the IFA. That is how we go to the next level. And so thank you for carrying the torch.
Thanks so much. Signing off. And we'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.